SessionFactory in Hibernate. Now we are focusing on SessionFactory. The main contract here is the creation of session instances. Usually an application has a single SessionFactory instance and threads servicing client requests obtain sessions instances from this factory. The internal state of a SessionFactory is immutable. Once it is created, this internal state is set. This internal state includes all of the metadata about object relational mapping. Implementers must be thread safe. Here you can see SessionFactory and session in Hibernate. SessionFactory is an interface available in org.hibernate package, which extends referenceable and serializable interface and provide factory methods to get session object. Let's see some points about this SessionFactory. SessionFactory is thread safe, so multiple threads can access SessionFactory at the same time. SessionFactory is immutable. Once we create SessionFactory, we can not modify it. If you look SessionFactory methods, we don't have any setter kind of method. SessionFactory is created at the time of application startup. It reads all information from the configurable file. Hibernate.cfg.xml file. We should have one SessionFactory for one database configuration. We can create SessionFactory object using configuration class. Here first we are creating configuration class object and call configure method. Which has two overloaded versions, one without parameter like configure method, and another one is configure string resources. If we use configure without parameters method, hibernate.cfg.xml is defined. Session is an interface available in org.hibernate package, which provide different API to communicate Java application to Hibernate. Let's see some points related to session. The session is not thread safe. The main use of the session object to perform create, get and delete operations for Java classes entity. The first level cache belongs to the session object. We can have multiple sessions for a SessionFactory. We can get session object using SessionFactory reference. As here. Here you can see configuration. You can see the code here. Configuration config equal new configuration dot configure, and configuration is connected to SessionFactory. You can see config.build SessionFactory method here to get a SessionFactory object, and SessionFactory is connected to session. You can see factory open session method to get a session here. As an example, we can consider this code segment, and here you can see the interface SessionFactory. The main contract here is the creation of session interfaces. Usually an application has a single SessionFactory instance, and thread serving client request obtain session instances from this factory. This interface is in org.hibernate package. Here you can see build SessionFactory method is called. Here you can see the XML configuration file is by default expected to be in the root of your class path. Here's an example here. The file is hibernate.config.xml here, and here you can see a SessionFactory instance listed as /j and di /name, SessionFactory name, this one. We can see properties here and mapped files here and cache settings here. Now we are considering SessionFactory. Interface SessionFactory. A SessionFactory represents an instance of Hibernate. It maintains the runtime metamodel representing persistent entities, their attributes, their associations, and their mappings to the relational tables, along with configuration that affects the runtime behavior of Hibernate and instances of services that Hibernate needs to perform its duties. This is in the package org.hibernate. Now we are considering native Hibernate APIs and HBM.xml mapping. In his example code, obtaining the org.hibernate SessionFactory. The method SessionFactory built SessionFactory. Shorthand form of building a SessionFactory through the builder without any additional option overrides. This is in the interface metadata, which is in the package org.hibernate.boot. The org.hibernate.tutorials.hbm.native API illustration test class illustrates using the Hibernate native API. The examples in this here are presented as JUnit test for ease of use. One benefit of this approach is set up and tear down regularly, roughly illustrate how org.hibernate.SessionFactory is created at the startup of an application and close at the end of the application life cycle. Here the example obtaining the org.hibernate.SessionFactory. The setup methods first built org.hibernate.boot.registry.standard service registry instance, which incorporate configuration configuration information into working set of services for use by SessionFactory. In this here we define all configuration information in hibernate.csg.xml, so there is not much interesting to see here. Using a standard service registry, we create org.hibernate boot.meta data sources, which is the starting point for telling Hibernate about your domain model. Again, since we defined that in hibernate.cfg.xml, so there is not much interesting to see here. org.hibernate.boot.metadata represent the complete partially validated view of the application domain model, which the SessionFactory will be based on. The final step in the bootstrap process is to build the SessionFactory. The SessionFactory is a thread-safe object that is instantiated once to serve the entire application. The SessionFactory acts as a factory for org.hibernate.session instances, which should be thought of as a corollary to a unit of work. A SessionFactory is set up once for an application. Configure settings from the hibernate.cfg.xml. Registry would be destroyed by the SessionFactory, but we had the trouble building the SessionFactory so destroy it manually. Now we are considering building the SessionFactory in native bootstrapping in Bootstrap. Here the native bootstrapping putting it all together here. The interface session factory builder, the contract for building a SessionFactory given a number of options. This is in the package org.hibernate.boot. The final step in native bootstrapping is to build the SessionFactory itself, much like we discussed before. If you are okay with the default behavior of building SessionFactory from metadata reference, you can simply call build SessionFactory method on metadata object. However, if you would like to adjust the building process, you will need to use the SessionFactory builder as obtained via metadata get SessionFactory builder. Here we are considering building SessionFactory via SessionFactory builder. The interface SessionFactory builder, the contract for building SessionFactory given a number of options. This is in the package org.hibernate.boot. The bootstrapping API is quite flexible, but in most cases it makes the most sense to think of it as three-step process. 1. Build the standard service registry. 2. Build the metadata. 3. Use those two to build SessionFactory. Supply a SessionFactory level interceptor. Add a custom observer. Apply CDI bean manager for JPA event listeners. Now we are considering configuring the SessionFactory metadata via the Jakarta persistence bootstrap. In Jakarta persistence bootstrapping in Bootstrap. Here implementing meta builder contributor. Interface meta builder contributor. A Bootstrap possess hook for contributing settings for meta builder. This is in the package org.hibernate.boot.spi. As previously seen, the Hibernate native bootstrap mechanism allows you to customize a great variety of configuration which are passed via metadata object. When using Hibernate as a Jakarta persistence provider, the entity managed factory is backed up by SessionFactory. For this reason, you might still want to use metadata object to pass various settings which cannot be supplied via the standard Hibernate configuration settings. For this reason, you can use metadata builder contributor class, as you can see in this example. Here implementing metadata builder contributor. org.hibernate.orm.test.bootstrap.spi.metadata builder contributor. The above metadata builder contributor is used the above metadata builder contributor is used to register SQL function which is not defined by the currently running Hibernate dialect, but which we need to reference in our JPQL queries. By having access to the metadata builder, class that is used by the underlying SessionFactory, the Jakarta persistent bootstrap becomes just as flexible as Hibernate native bootstrap mechanism. You can then pass the custom metadata builder contributor via the Hibernate.metadata_builder_contributor configuration property. Now we are considering SessionFactory statistics method in org.hibernate.stat.statistics methods in statistics. get entity names, get the names of all entities configured with the current SessionFactory. The method string array get entity names of all entities. This is in interface statistics, which is in the package org.hibernate.stat. Now we are considering SessionFactory service registry in SessionFactory service in types of service registries in services and registries. org.hibernate.service.spi.SessionFactory service registry is the third standard Hibernate service registry. Interface SessionFactory service registry, specialized service registry implementation that holds services which needs to access the SessionFactory during initialization. This is in the package org.hibernate.service.spi. SessionFactory service registry is designed to hold services which need to access the SessionFactory. Typically, its parent registry is standard service registry. Integrators, as it stands in 4.x, operate on the SessionFactory service registry. Currently, SessionFactory service registry holds 4 services: event listener registry, statistics implementer, native query interpreter, and cache implementer. An example we can consider as an exception example, we can consider Hibernate exception. This indicates a problem opening the session, pretty rare here. For example, this exception can occur in open session method in interface SessionFactory. As an error example, we can consider this one. The content of element type SessionFactory must match property mapping class cache collection cache event listener. Now this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for watching it.